"You're a witch! Admit it! You're a witch!" screams a woman at a young girl who's been handcuffed to a kitchen table for over 2 years. 2 other children cower in the corner, unaware that they're about to be ordered to do the unthinkable to this girl, their own sister. But they don't have a choice. Cruelty is all they know. They've been born into a house of pure evil. To make matters worse, the perpetrator of the violence is the mother of all the children. A woman who is arguably the most infamous and hated mother in all the annals of American criminality. Her cruelty to her kids was almost beyond belief. It scaled the outer limits of human depravity, and she is still alive today. Her name is Theresa Jimmy Francine Knorr, and this is her story. Let's look at what happened to Theresa herself when she was young. She was born Theresa Jimmy Francine Cross on March 12, 1946, in Sacramento, California. Her dad, Jim, was an assistant cheesemaker at Sacramento's Golden State Dairy. Her mom, Swanee, worked at a lumber yard, operating a pencil-making machine. Theresa had an elder sister, Rosemary, and 2 older step-siblings as well, William and Clara Tapp, who were from Swanee's first husband. Theresa was known in the neighborhood as being something of a loner, only ever appearing happy when at her mother's side. So when her mom suddenly collapsed one day on her way to the local store with Theresa in tow, Theresa's world quickly crumbled. Witnesses said they saw Swanee lying on the ground in Theresa's arms. On March 6, 1961, Swanee was buried at Sunset Lawn Cemetery. Theresa would never be the same again. With no source of income, Jim had to sell the house. Theresa and her sister's domestic bliss had turned into a nightmare. But it wasn't the poverty that troubled Theresa, it was the loss of her mom. She needed to fill that space that had been taken up with her mother's devotion to her. So it's not surprising that she jumped into the arms of the first guy she met. His name was Clifford Clyde Sanders, a man 5 years her senior. On September 29, 1962, Theresa, now 16, and Clifford were married, and she became Theresa Jimmy Sanders. She dropped out of school, and the two moved into a small apartment in North Highlands, a suburban area in Sacramento County, California. The marriage was not one made in heaven, though. They barely knew each other. They dated just a matter of weeks before they said their wedding vows, and the "until death do us part" bit was about to become very significant. Young woman, almost pathologically possessive of Clifford, not allowing him much freedom. They argued constantly, but despite not getting along, on July 16, 1963, their first child was born, Howard Clyde Sanders. At the beginning, this new addition to the family was mostly a joy, but Theresa's possessiveness soon reared its ugly head. As the baby cried, the couple spent many of the days screaming at each other. Clifford's family later said that he would have likely left her had Theresa not become pregnant again. Now, with another child on the way, they had to leave their one-room apartment and move into a house in Galt, Sacramento. Money was always an issue. Theresa and Clifford were often seen arguing about it, as well as his alleged infidelity. And on June 22, 1964, one of those arguments spun out of control. Rather than doing his duty of taking care of the kids, Clifford went out drinking with his friends all day. When he arrived home, worse for wear, Theresa launched into a tirade about him being unfaithful to her, which she would later say resulted in him punching her in the face. She filed a report against him for assault and battery, but later the charges were dropped when she refused to sign the papers. On July 5, 1964, the frayed relationship ignited again. It was Clifford's birthday. Theresa, still pregnant with her second child, didn't want him to go out drinking. She was sure he was cheating on her, and she let it be known. Whether he really was cheating is not certain, but the accusations were enough to compel him to leave her. He packed his bags, swearing to never return. He didn't get far. On his way out the door, Theresa picked up a rifle and shot him, killing him almost instantly. Police Chief Walter Froelich was one of the first on the scene. Theresa swore it was self-defense. "I grabbed a gun to make him keep from hitting me, and it went off," she protested. Theresa was arrested and taken to Sacramento County Jail. Her son Howard was sent to stay with one of her relatives. On July 7, 1964, the Sacramento Bee Daily newspaper reported Clifford Sanders, 23, was slain yesterday morning in the couple's small Galt home. Investigators reported the bullet apparently grazed off his left wrist and lodged in his heart. In the subsequent trial, Theresa's attorney argued that Clifford had been a violent drunk who'd often used his fists to settle arguments. This just didn't ring true to some of the people who knew the couple. According to them, Clifford was not a violent man. On the stand, Clifford's sister, Lydia Hanson, testified that it was actually Theresa who was the problem and Clifford the victim. She said Theresa was incredibly possessive and jealous, She testified that Theresa would rather kill Clifford before letting any other woman have him. She told the jury, "I believe with all my heart that Theresa Sanders planned to kill my brother." Deputy District Attorney Donald Dorfman wanted a first-degree murder conviction. He was sure that Theresa had killed Clifford in cold blood, a result not of domestic violence, but because she was pathologically jealous and prone to outbursts of fury. Theresa's attorney, Robert Zarek, said that his client had only acted in self-defense, protecting herself and her unborn child from an abusive man. Yet, when Dr. Arthur Wallace took the stand as the first witness for the prosecution, he said Clifford had no alcohol in his blood when he was killed. This contradicted Theresa's story of her drunk husband attacking her. The doctor explained that it was highly likely Clifford was shot when his hands were up in front of his chest, as if trying to protect himself, which would explain how the bullet first grazed his wrist. Theresa took the stand on her own behalf and delivered a tearful testimony, moving the jury with her stories about her violent alcoholic husband. Friends and relatives of Theresa also took the stand in her defense. A mental health counselor, Dr. Leroy Walter, said Theresa had been an anxious wife and after the shooting was remorseful. In his closing remarks, Dorfman said, "Don't be fooled, this was cold-blooded murder." He told the jury not every murderer can look like the witch in Snow White. She is 18 and pregnant, but that doesn't overcome the fact that she maliciously shot and killed her husband without provocation. Despite the prosecution having a strong case, Theresa was acquitted on September 22, 1964. She was, after all, pregnant, and there was also the other child to think about. The jury may have sympathized with Theresa at a time in history when domestic violence was quite common. Only in hindsight do we now perhaps conclude that Clifford might have been the victim here. Meanwhile, Theresa was about to embark on a lifetime of inhumanity. The severity of her crimes so intense, her manipulative behavior so in tune with a personality disorder, it's hard to believe her tearful tales in court were the truth and nothing but the truth. On March 16, 1965, Theresa, now a free woman, gave birth to a girl, Sheila Gay Sanders. This bundle of joy that came screaming into the world would leave it screaming too, but that's a story we'll get to in due time. Theresa was not an ideal mother to Howard and baby Sheila, to say the least. While pregnant, she had taken to heavy drinking. She often headed to the local American Legion Hall to drown her sorrows and flirt with men. She was known for her attractiveness, and she certainly had a way with the guys. It's believed that she was exceptionally manipulative and possibly endowed with a narcissistic personality disorder. One thing for certain is, when her good looks would fade in the future, she would lose her power to attract men, and her bitterness would become a deadly malignancy. Theresa met her ideal man during a drinking session at the Legion Hall when she bumped into Estelle Lee Thornsberry, a U.S. Army veteran. Estelle was insecure and needy of love, and Theresa was there to exploit that need. He had a serious swimming accident 2 years earlier, which left him a quadriplegic. Now wheelchair-bound, he met Theresa, who, unlike many women, didn't seem to mind his disability. For Theresa, finding a man who wasn't as mobile as most and had to literally look up to her was a match made in heaven. Estelle was smitten at the start of the relationship, so when the opportunity arose to move in with a pretty young woman, despite her having 2 kids, he grabbed the proverbial bull by the horns. They soon rented a small apartment together. Theresa helped him do all the things that were difficult for a man in a wheelchair, and at night they'd lie in bed, talking about their hopes and dreams. But she soon started to take advantage of the fact that it was difficult for him to get out of the house. She left him at home almost every night of the week with the 2 kids. He essentially became her live-in babysitter. She'd come home each night drunk, ignoring his entreaties about her behavior. Worse, after a few months of this, he found out she was sleeping with his best friend, one of the friends he'd really depended on after the accident. He couldn't begin to contemplate just how cold she'd become. Then, one night after another argument, she packed her bags, filling them with many of his belongings, and left him, broke and broken. In hindsight, he was probably fortunate the relationship ended sooner rather than later. After all, he could have ended up like Clifford. But Theresa didn't waste much time finding another man to move in with. On one of her many drunken nights out, she met Robert Knorr, a private in the Marine Corps. Yet again, the relationship seemed to move too fast. She confessed her undying love to him, and he, similarly entranced, returned her affection. She was, after all, a real beauty. Within a few months of dating, she was pregnant again, and the two started talking about marriage. But this was the era of the Vietnam War. Knorr was shipped off in February 1966, and soon after, he was hit in the shoulder by a bullet. After a stint in a field hospital, he returned to the battlefield and was shot again, which resulted in another stay in a field hospital. He avoided death yet again when a few months later, having recovered from his injury, he was crossing a bridge when it was blown up, with shrapnel entering his arms and legs. His injuries were more serious this time, and he was shipped back to the U.S., where he spent many weeks recovering at the Oakland Naval Hospital. Then, on July 9, 1966, he and Theresa issued their wedding vows to each other. By this time, she was already 7 months pregnant. The child, Susan Marlene Knorr, was born on September 27, 1966. And unfortunately, just like Sheila, her birth could be considered a curse rather than a miracle. Theresa should have been over the moon. But as you've seen, children more or less got in the way of her doing the things she wanted, which mostly included drinking and meeting new men. Nonetheless, she became pregnant again, and on September 15, 1967, she gave Robert his first son, William Robert Knorr. Then, on December 31, 1968, she bore him his second son, Robert Wallace Knorr Jr. Now, they were a family with 5 children, a girl and 2 boys from her marriage to Robert, and Howard and Sheila from the husband she'd shot and killed, Clifford. And Theresa was often left to take care of all those kids by herself. After Robert's injuries, he wasn't in any kind of shape for action on the battlefield, but he stayed in the military as a burial escort, when a soldier escorts another fallen soldier to his final resting place. This took Robert all over the world. It was a serious job and he was proud to have it. But Theresa didn't see it that way. When he was away in a foreign country, she'd see that home. Sure, he was cheating on her. It seems the embers of jealousy she'd once had with Clifford fired up again with Robert. She was absolutely sure he was being unfaithful to her. The jealousy hadn't reared its ugly head with Estelle because of his disability and the fact that he was home all the time taking care of the kids. But with Robert, the paranoid impulses that Theresa had with Clifford came back with a vengeance. But this time, she didn't grab a gun and shoot the man she distrusted. She took her anger out on the kids. She would refuse them food for the slightest transgression, like talking when they were supposed to be quiet, or force them to sit on the floor and not move for an entire day. The slightest transgression would be met with fierce retribution, but these were still the early days of her violence. It would get far, far worse in the future. Thankfully for the kids, Robert was still around, so she never quite reached the brutality she was capable of. But, as happened with Clifford, Robert grew tired of constantly being told he was cheating. In June 1969, he collected his things and left. Not to be outdone, Theresa filed for divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty. Robert was flabbergasted. He never so much as laid a finger on her. Nonetheless, the two got back together and promised to give the marriage another go. Despite Robert trying to make things work, Theresa's jealousy continued to be a major factor in their relationship. But about a year after he first left, it was she who filed for divorce. The judge who'd presided over Theresa's murder trial was the same judge who granted the divorce. Theresa was pregnant again at the time, and on June 3, 1970, the 6th and last of her children, Theresa Terry Marie Knorr, came into the world. A world that would soon become a living hell. So far, you've seen signs of the evil that Theresa Sr. was capable of, but we haven't even really gotten started yet. Theresa's bitterness was about to turn into something very ugly. Alone, with 6 kids, she was a broken woman. She was angry at the world. She hated men. She hated everything, really. And the only people around her that she could make pay for her pain were her children. Robert made attempts to see them, but Theresa did her best to keep them away from him. He soon married again, and he and Theresa had no contact after that, which infuriated her even more, even though she didn't want him near the kids. In spite of her festering antagonism toward males, she soon found another man. The two wasted no time getting married, Theresa yet again proving she still had her charms. Her new husband was Ronald Pulliam, a railway worker. Like with Estelle, she saw in him a weakness she could exploit. The mistake that she'd made with Robert was choosing a man endowed with too much confidence, someone who wouldn't put up with her tantrums or with her drinking. Ronald would, though. He was a pushover compared to Robert. And after a brief period of happiness, Theresa soon started leaving the kids with him, and she went out to binge drink. She'd come home late, or quite often she wouldn't come home at all. Ronald did at least have the sense to get out of the relationship early. He filed for divorce, stating that Theresa had been unfaithful to him, and once again the same judge presided over the proceedings. Theresa, now 30 years old, spent most of her time after that drinking at the American Legion Hall, and it's there where she met the 59-year-old copy desk editor at the Sacramento Union newspaper, Chet Harris. This time, she really did have a reason to be jealous. As usual, she agreed to a fast-track marriage, but no sooner did they get hitched than she discovered old Chet had a very particular hobby. He liked photographing naked women. He had nudes posted all over his bedroom walls, and he asked her to pose too, but she declined the offer. Theresa wondered what she'd gotten herself into, but it turned out that Chet was really good with the kids. He didn't mind staying home with them. Susan was particularly fond of Chet. Some nights they'd sit in the living room doing jigsaws for hours as he told her stories about monsters from Greek mythology. Theresa had never been a big fan of her kids and had always considered them to be a ball and chain in her life. She didn't mind leaving them with her lovers, but she was now resenting the fact that Susan seemed to like Chet more than she liked her. As was her way, she soon became jealous. But this time it was of her own child's affections. It angered her to see Susan so happy. So on November 22, 1976, just 2 months after the wedding, Theresa filed for divorce. It was the same judge again. He had now presided over 4 of her dissolved marriages as well as her murder case. Luckily for him, he retired soon after, marking the last time that he'd have to deal with Theresa. She'd soon be someone else's problem. So there she was, the mother of 6 children with a string of failed marriages behind her. It was at that point that something changed in Theresa. Her children, the ones who survived her at least, would later say that it seemed like darkness descended on their mother. It was as if she had given up hope. She'd always been a pretty poor mother, but something had snapped inside of her, and now she was about to become an evil mom. Her good looks began to fade. She was rapidly gaining weight and looked much older. She seemed to relinquish any ambitions about reeling in a new man. Gone were the days of spending all of her time at the bar. Instead, she spent most of her time at home, drinking day and night. The children tried best they could to stay out of her way, which was virtually impossible in their small house. Theresa simmered and hissed on the couch like an undetonated bomb. It was only a matter of time until something caused her to blow. Theresa Jr., who often went by Terry, said that her mother became totally unapproachable during this time. She said if she tried to hug her or be nice to her, she would be accused of trying to get something. But if the kids stayed out of their mom's way, she said they were accused of being selfish, unloving children. Terry said all the kids were treated like demon seeds because they were part of the men that Theresa now hated more than anything in the world. The 2 youngest boys, William and Robert, later said that Theresa locked the doors and that the kids were never allowed outside. They weren't even allowed to have friends. She even removed the telephone so no one could contact the outside world. If she was going to be unhappy, everyone was going to be unhappy. Their mom had turned their home into a prison, but it was about to get even worse. The longer Theresa's ill will towards the world festered as she sat drinking on the couch, the more cruel she'd become to her children. To some extent, the kids weren't aware that other children had very different lives, that they were fed properly, played games, and had friends. Robert later said, "I grew up in an insane asylum, basically, but what's worse is we didn't know it was an insane asylum." Terry said on one occasion her mom was drunk and she pulled out her handgun, a .22 caliber pistol. She put it to Terry's head, threatening to kill her. Theresa seemed to enjoy seeing her daughter's intense fear, and for months after, Terry had nightmares about being killed by her mom. But the depravity was still in its nascent stages. Theresa was just getting going. Soon she forced the other children to participate in the punishment of others. She wanted them to feel guilt as well as fear. Food was always scarce, and the kids grew thinner and thinner. One day, Theresa got the kids together and told them that Susan was a witch. Chet Harris, who she now resented with a vengeance, had apparently turned Susan into a witch on one of those nights that they'd stayed up and talked about mythology. Susan likely could not have fully understood the insanity of her mother. She just wanted to be loved, as any child does. As she turned into a teenager and matured into an attractive young woman, Theresa's resentment toward her grew even more. Her own good looks that she'd relied on to manipulate men were now just a memory, and her daughter's beauty now made her irate and envious. At one point, Susan actually managed to escape the home, but she was caught by a truancy officer while she was running through the streets and sent to Sutter Memorial Psychiatric Ward. There, she told the doctors and later a child protection officer what was going on in her household, to her and the other children. The authorities soon turned up at the house, and to their eternal shame, they believed Theresa when she said Susan was lying, that it was all a fantasy. Reluctantly, Susan, now frightened out of her wits, told them her mother was telling the truth. Turning the prey over to the predator, they warned Susan not to run away again. Theresa was going to make Susan pay for what she'd done, and once again she made sure the other children participated directly in the punishment. But Theresa wasn't done. Susan had to suffer even more. To ensure she never ran out of the home again, Theresa bought a pair of handcuffs. At this point, the older kids were no longer attending school. No one in the family even made it past the 8th grade. When they did attend school, they had to be home right after. A school friend of one of the kids later said that if they missed the bus, they became hysterical. Neighbors, of course, saw the children, but rarely did anyone get a glimpse inside the house. Those that did say the place was filthy and stank of urine. When the kids stopped attending school, they stayed home all day, every day, never being allowed out of the house. At night, Theresa handcuffed Susan to the bed. She ordered all the other kids to take turns standing over her, like child soldiers on lookout duty. During the day, she handcuffed Susan in the kitchen. This went on for years. Susan spent so long handcuffed on the floor that she developed sores on her body. Her siblings hated that they were forced to help their mother keep their sister prisoner. But it was better it was happening to someone else than them. And since they had little contact with the outside world, they didn't understand how insane this all was. According to the surviving kids, after that time, Susan was psychologically broken. She stopped eating, she was weak, she would die if this didn't stop. But when she broke, Theresa said she was no longer an escape risk and so finally was allowed to sleep unshackled. The other kids were told they no longer had to keep lookout, so they managed at last to get a full night's rest. This was a huge relief, but it didn't mean Theresa had suddenly realized how cruel she was. And then somehow, in 1982, when Susan was 16, things got even worse. Theresa kept gaining weight, and her once good looks of hers seemed to be transmuting to the faces of her now pretty daughters. Rather than accept this as one of the inevitabilities of the passage of time, or what happens when you drink and smoke and eat junk food all day, she blamed Susan, saying it was the work of one of Susan's spells. Susan said Theresa was up to her old tricks again. She put a hex on her, making her ugly. Handcuffing her to tables wasn't going to change anything. She had to teach Susan a lesson that she wouldn't forget. The children were sitting in the room one day when they heard a gunshot. When they ran to the kitchen, they found Theresa holding a gun. It was the same one that she had once held against Terry's head. Susan lay on the floor, blood issuing from her back. Theresa showed no signs of emotion. She ordered the kids to take Susan to the bathroom and put her in the tub. Calling an ambulance was out of the question, so Theresa stemmed the blood flow herself. She put a bandage over the entry wound, leaving the bullet in Susan's body. For the next few weeks, the children took turns to stand by Susan's bedside, feeding her tidbits of food and giving her water. Unbelievably, Susan eventually regained her strength, the bullet still lodged in her back. The family moved into a new place in North Sacramento in November 1983, which was a trailer in a dismal-looking trailer park on Sacramento's Auburn Boulevard, an area known for drugs, prostitution, and rundown motels. It was the ideal place not to be seen, where strange goings-on usually resulted in people turning the other way. A neighbor in the park would later say that, "I knew they were weird, but I didn't know they were that weird." Another said, "I didn't like that woman." A neighbor who did speak to her would later say, "She had a high, tense voice, and she talked fast, without any commas or periods." Life went on as usual, meaning the occasional argument, but nothing as serious as anyone being shot again. It wasn't until July 1984 that Theresa took her violence to the extreme again. The object of her ire was again Susan. The two got into an argument, and the next thing, Theresa picked up a pair of scissors and stabbed Susan in the back. Susan wasn't grievously injured this time, but she knew if she stayed in that house much longer, there would be an attack that she wouldn't wake up from. She told Theresa she was now 17, a young adult, and it was time she moved out and started a life elsewhere. None of the kids expected Theresa to let her go, but she did. She told Susan she could leave on one condition, only if she were allowed to remove the bullet from Susan's body. Theresa saw this as evidence that could one day come back to haunt her. Given what you've heard so far, it would be easy to say Theresa was clinically insane. But this shows that she wasn't. She knew what she was doing. She was always planning ahead. The home surgery was to take place on the kitchen table, not exactly where you'd call a sterile environment. Theresa's tools to remove the bullet from her back were knives and a scalpel. This was going to be a botched job of the highest order. The biggest risk, of course, was infection. As an anesthetic, this incalculably unloving mom told Susan to take a handful of Malarial capsules, which is an antipsychotic medication, and wash it down with a quart of hard liquor. While this is never advised in a medical setting, it worked, and soon Susan was knocked out. After that, Theresa went to work. Although according to some sources, Theresa didn't perform this ad hoc surgery herself, but made her son Robert perform the deed. But whether it was Robert or Theresa who performed the surgery, either way, Susan did not come out of it in good shape. It's believed she likely had a severe infection which turned into sepsis. Sepsis can be deadly, especially when it's not treated in a hospital setting. It's believed that Theresa did give Susan antibiotics, but the next day Susan's condition got much worse. The kids later said the whites of her eyes became yellow. They didn't know it at the time, but this was jaundice brought on by the sepsis. At that moment, Susan still had a good chance of surviving, but only if she was rushed to a hospital. Theresa wouldn't let that happen. Susan lay in bed, becoming more and more delirious. Terry later said that she noticed black marks all over Susan's back, which would turn out to be severe internal bleeding. In short, Susan was a wreck. This was the result of years of physical and psychological torture. And this time it didn't look like she would survive, so Theresa made the decision not to get her daughter medical help, but to finish her off. Theresa took a roll of duct tape out of a drawer and wrapped it around her daughter's arms and legs before placing another piece over her mouth. Theresa packed all of Susan's clothes and other things into trash bags and then ordered William and Robert to carry Susan out to the car. They all drove south on Highway 89, about 100 miles into the Sierra Nevada, and pulled off when they got to a place called Square Creek Bridge. William and Robert were told to carry their sister down to the riverbank. That they did, and Theresa followed. When they put Susan down, Theresa doused her body in gasoline and lit a match. They walked back to the car, but didn't turn around to see their sister's body in flames. Susan was found the next day, but due to the condition of the body, a positive ID couldn't be made and Susan became a Jane Doe. Case number 4873/84. Dr. A.V. Kuna, who conducted Susan's autopsy, said the victim was between 18 and 22 years old, 5 feet 3 inches tall, and weighed about 115 pounds. The body, he said, had suffered extreme abuse, and while the injuries she had sustained were life-threatening, the cause of death was from smoke inhalation. That meant that when Theresa covered her daughter in gas and lit her on fire, Susan had still been alive. Susan, after a lifetime of pain, was finally dead. But Theresa's run of cruelty was by no means over. The boys said there was a strange atmosphere in the house for the following few weeks after Susan was gone. In a normal world, the remaining kids would have been utterly distraught, but this wasn't a normal world. It was a perverted existence engineered by a sad, sadistic woman. Their minds had been so warped over the years that they were too traumatized to escape. Sheila, now 20 years old, didn't really understand how the world worked outside of the house. She'd never been shown love. She lived in continual fear, as all the kids did. So when Theresa told her that she'd have to sell her body to make money for the family, she reluctantly agreed. Sheila knew it was wrong. She absolutely didn't want to do it, but she didn't dare defy her mom. In a twisted way, she soon discovered there were benefits to her new vocation. Theresa, now pocketing thousands of dollars a month, showered Sheila in praise, telling the other children that Sheila's behavior was exemplary. This, said Theresa, is what children are expected to do for their hard-working mothers. The boys looked on with a kind of envy when they saw how much freedom Sheila was now being given. Theresa, being the arch-manipulator that she was, had always understood the merits of a divide-and-conquer strategy. She was forever choosing a favorite among her kids, creating ill will amongst them as they all vied for her attention. Alas, Sheila's time in the spotlight of her mother's twisted affection didn't last long. They got into an argument one night after Theresa accused Sheila of being pregnant and not being honest about it. She also said that Sheila had become infected with a venereal disease and that she somehow contracted it too, possibly from the toilet seat. When Sheila screamed back, reminding Theresa of the absolute unfairness of the deal, seeing as she was essentially a slave for her mom, Theresa exploded into one of the worst tantrums the boys had ever seen. She took her paddle and attacked Sheila, after which she hogtied her and shoved her into a closet. Theresa told the boys that the door should not be opened no matter how much Sheila cried, and that she was to be kept in the closet without food or water, despite it being very hot in there. Years later, the youngest daughter, Terry, said she wanted Sheila to confess. That was mother's way. Beat them until they confess. As people subjected to torture often do, Sheila soon confessed to everything and anything she'd been accused of. Theresa then accused her of lying, of making up the details of the confession, and prolonged Sheila's time in the closet, where she was now becoming incredibly weak. After 3 days in the hot closet with no water, Sheila was edging close to death. Terry, who was 13 at the time, later said she heard her sister saying, "Help me, help me," before things went quiet. The boys later testified that on the 3rd day they heard a thumping noise coming from the closet. They didn't know it at the time, but their sister had collapsed. When they finally opened the door, she was lying in the fetal position, dead. Theresa didn't allow them to move her, though. Instead, Sheila's body lay in the closet a few more days until the stench of decomposition was too much to tolerate. The remaining siblings knew what was coming next. Theresa told them to put Sheila's body in a box and carry the box out to the car. They all drove up Interstate 80 in the direction of Truckee Airport in California's Placer County, where they stopped near a field and unloaded Sheila into a patch of weeds. A few hours later, a man named Elmer Barber found what looked like a homemade casket. When he looked inside, he saw a body in a wretched state of decomposition. The Nevada County Sheriff's Department would later make the body a Jane Doe just like her sister, number 660785. The cause of death was noted as undetermined. Theresa had killed 2 of her daughters, but there was still one left, Terry, and she was terrified of what might happen next. Theresa had always been crueler to her girls, and all the children noticed that Theresa was starting to act even more erratically. The house still smelled awful. No amount of cleaning could get rid of the stink of decomposition. Theresa feared the smell would waft out, and sooner or later someone would complain. So she decided to take the most reasonable course of action and burn the place down. On September 26, 1986, she covered parts of the trailer in lighter fluid, and after packing the family's essentials, she ordered Terry to ignite the fluid. But the plan didn't go as expected. As soon as the flames began to spread across the trailer, neighbors noticed and called the fire department, who quickly arrived to put out the fire. Much of the trailer was saved before it could be damaged, including the closet where Sheila had died. So in response to her plan not working out, Theresa ran. She got out of Sacramento, and this time she didn't take her kids with her. They weren't exactly kids at this point anyway. They might still have been under her spell, but Theresa wasn't able or willing to make them go with her. Howard, who was at this point 26, split from the family. William, who was 24, had enough freedom to meet a girl, and he went to stay with her. Terry, the last remaining girl, only 16, managed to get away with using Sheila's ID, so she passed as 21. Only Robert, 19, stayed with Theresa, and they both moved to Las Vegas. None of them breathed a word about their murdered siblings, though. They were still so traumatized they kept the years of torture secret, and Theresa might well have gotten away with the murders had Robert not broken the law on November 7, 1991. Short on cash, he walked into Red's Bar on North Nellis Boulevard in Las Vegas and, waving a gun in the air, tried to rob the place. Exactly what happened next is not clear, but an altercation of some kind took place, and the bartender, Robert Ward, was shot. After Robert was convicted and given 16 years, Theresa knew better than to hang around, and so she moved to Salt Lake City. There, she moved in with an 85-year-old woman, acting as the woman's caretaker. It just so happened that Terry was also then living in Salt Lake City. She'd gotten married and was working in a grocery store. She would have been horrified had she known her mother was living nearby. But then on October 28, 1993, she got the confidence to give it another shot. After watching TV, she phoned the hotline for the television show America's Most Wanted. Though the cases shown weren't related to her, it still inspired her to approach the police one last time. From there, Terry was told to contact detectives in California, where Susan's body had been dumped, and this time the police listened to her. Police Sergeant Ron Perea of the Nevada County, California Sheriff Office met with her, and she told him the full, lurid tale. Given how unbelievable it sounded, he was hesitant at first, but he checked out her story and was able to corroborate it with evidence. Finally, police were able to connect the 2 Jane Does to the sisters Terry was talking about. The Los Angeles Times was soon reporting that the police had begun unraveling a tale of domestic violence so depraved that even they were shocked. The public was incensed, especially as Terry had tried to come forward before and been told she was making it up. In a separate news report, it was said the only thing we can surmise is that the people she reported it to thought her story was so bizarre it couldn't be truthful. At the start of November 1993, investigators filed felony complaints against Theresa. The 2 brothers, William and Robert, who'd helped her dispose of the bodies, were also charged. William was in Sacramento working at a warehouse, while Robert was serving time for the Vegas robbery in the Nevada County Jail. Once in custody, both men were first reluctant to talk about their deceased sisters or anything that had happened in that house of horror, but both eventually confessed to playing a part in their mother's gruesome crimes. 5 days later, investigators in Salt Lake City told the California detectives that they knew Theresa was likely in their city due to her applying for a driver's license and the fact that just a few days before, she'd been arrested for a DUI. Sergeant John Fitzgerald of the Placer County Sheriff's Office flew out to Salt Lake to the house listed on Theresa's driving application form. He waited until night fell and knocked on her front door, after which she answered and was immediately placed in handcuffs. Their timing was impeccable, since Theresa was in the middle of packing up her belongings to move to another city. Theresa refused to talk to detectives, only telling them she wanted a lawyer. The charges against her included torture and murder. After being arraigned in Salt Lake, she was extradited to Placer County, where she was charged with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, multiple murder, and murder by torture, which meant she was facing a possible death sentence. After pleading not guilty, she was sent to Sacramento County Jail. Superior Court Judge J. Richard Cousins, who'd read out the charges, also ordered that William be tried as an adult. Robert agreed to testify against his mom in exchange for a less harsh sentence. The next month, all the charges against him were dropped. Theresa, who was then informed about Robert turning against her, decided she wasn't going to win and changed her plea to guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. In 1995, Judge William R. Ridgway sentenced Theresa to 2 life sentences, saying her crimes showed callousness beyond belief. While the boys did help get rid of the bodies, there was no doubt that their life of brutal torture made them victims too. Robert, who was serving time for robbery, was handed 3 years to be served concurrently with his robbery sentence, and William was put under probation in order to undergo therapy. Both men would require a lot of therapy, as would Theresa Jr. Sadly, Terry died of a heart attack in 2011 at the age of 42, but not before appearing on various TV programs in an attempt to explain what happened to her and her siblings in that house. "What kind of mother would do that?" she once said during an interview. "What kind of person am I going to be for the rest of my life because of this? Believe me," she said, "I've asked myself 1,000 times why I didn't take my sisters and run." All the kids said the same thing. They'd been so scared, so brainwashed, they didn't have the ability to run. Theresa is still alive and serving her sentence. She'll be eligible for parole in 2027, though given the horrific nature of her crimes, it's likely she'll never walk the streets as a free woman again. Now go watch The Most Hated Killer in American Prison, or look at this deep dive to understand how minds can be controlled in CIA conspiracies that were true.